everyone, and welcome to today's Blueforce Manual Timesheet webinar, led by yours truly, Christian Contreras. Now, on this call today, we'll be focusing primarily on the manual timesheet process, kind of making sure everyone's familiar with that process, and going through some live demos of how to actually enter a manual timesheet. Now, as we do with all of our webinars, everyone is currently muted, so please, if you have any questions during today's session, please go to the webinar question area of the control panel and ask your question there, and I'll address it at the appropriate time in our conversations today. Now, kind of a review of the topics we'll be discussing today. There'll be, first off, reviewing the Blueforce payroll process. We're going to discuss a point of no return. I'll explain what that means in a little bit. We'll go through the Blueforce user expectations as well as what the daily tasks should entail as far as roles in Blueforce. We'll go through and discuss the handling of payroll adjustments, specifically how to create that manual timesheet, and then going through the submittal and approval process of that piece as well. And then I'll wrap this all up and tie it up into one nice little demo that we'll do at the end of our session today. So let's go ahead and get started. Probably the session will probably last a full hour to go through all these different topics. But like I said, this we have plenty of time, so please do ask questions if there are any. Now, one thing I will address to everyone, on your control panel there for the webinar, down at the bottom right side, you should have a little section called Handouts. In there, there's a handout called Manual Timesheets.pdf, in which you can actually click on, download that file, and save it to your machine. That is actually a copy of the slides that I'm going through today that actually detail and actually serve as a documentation as to how to do a manual timesheet. So it'll be beneficial for you to, during some time of this call before you hang up today, go ahead and download that document so you have it step by step of how to do a manual timesheet. All right, so let's go on. I know there's quite a few out there, so thank you all for jumping on our call today, and let's get started. So our first topic will be the kind of just a general review of the process of the whole payroll process. So to make sure that everyone is on the same page here, the first thing I want to go through is just making sure, provide just a brief overview, which initially means employees punch in via one of the time collection methods, whether it be Walter, which is our time clock. Phone in is our phone system, our toll-free number employees can call in and punch in and punch out on. Mobile Punch, which is a web app that is loaded on the smartphone, and then Web Punch, which is accessible through the internet. One of these four methods are the four ways that we right now provide to the employee to actually punch in and punch out. We stress that these are the four ways that the employee should be punching in and punching out. We do not want time to be manually entered in the system, with some few exceptions to that, but these are the four methods every employee should be doing on a daily basis. The supervisor or manager from there, which essentially is the editor or submitter, will review the employee punches on a daily basis. And I started that because we're going to talk about that a little later in more detail, but it has to be on a daily basis. We understand that you don't work every day, and that's understandable. But the next day you are back at the office or back at the site, we do want you to make sure you're reviewing those punches. And we ask that this be done on a daily basis so that when we catch any errors, we see if there's any issues with the payroll in advance and not wait until the very last minute, causing issues where we have to do manual timesheets. So daily review. From there, the manager, which is the submitter, typically the submitter, will review the time for the entire pay week and click on Submit. So whoever is the submitter, might not be the manager at the site, but this example is typically the manager. That person will submit that time. When you submit, you're basically saying you review that time, and that time is correct to your knowledge. Everything you see on there looks good. We do not just go and click Submit because we have to. We actually do a Submit because we've actually reviewed that time. Following that, the admin person at the office, maybe a different manager, someone in that role capacity, is the approver, and they will review the time once more, just going to give it a once over, and then click Approve. Now, when you click on Approve, you're essentially telling everyone from the corporate payroll team, you're telling everyone from the IT team that, and obviously everyone within your team, that you've actually signed off on this payroll and it's ready to be processed. Now, approving is typically the point of no return. What that means is once you hit approve, there is a process here that we go through that we can now go and mark that time for export. When we mark that time for export, the system says, all right, I'm going to load it up in a queue and send it over to JDE. So if there's an error after you approve, we cannot guarantee that we can always pull that time back to allow you to make any corrections or changes to it. Therefore, I call it the point of no return. So once you submit and you approve, that's two sets of eyes that have gone through and said that the payroll is good, push through. So at that point, you're almost at a standstill. You can't do anything past that point. Now, corporate takes over the exporting of time to JDE. We process your payroll, and then obviously we fund that payroll, whether it be a check or a pay card. So that's kind of a quick review of the general process. There's nothing much to it. Everything, some of the things that I mentioned as far as the payroll process here is the creation of employees. And the employees start in JDE. They go through the hiring process in JD Edwards. Once they have completed the hiring process there, that record is generated and created in Blueforce. So that way you can now start having that employee punch in, punch out. You can code time that employee, all that good stuff. But once again, this is the general process from a Blueforce standpoint, and it ends up in payroll in JDE once you're done with your payroll process on the Blueforce side. So kind of more on that point of no return, just to reiterate that piece, is that a point of return basically is that the submitters and approvers have to make sure that everything is correct before they finalize payroll. And part of that, the responsibility is to make sure that all hours are accounted for. And responsibility there is to ensure the employee is punching in, punching out on a daily basis. And I can't stress that second point enough. If there's an employee having an issue punching in, punching out, please pass the word on to the supervisor, manager, whatever it may be, and counsel the employee to show them how to punch in and punch out correctly. If it's a system issue, maybe a fingerprint not reading, there's other things that we can do to assist them. So don't think that they go to the clock one time and game over. They can't use that clock anymore. Situation like this, where an employee is not registering time on one of those 4 collection methods, is the #1 reason why we have manual timesheets. So from that standpoint, if we don't know, we as in Keander, myself on the EPAY team here at ISS, if we don't know about the issues, we can assist. So please put in a help desk ticket, let us know what the issue is, and we can actually give you hopefully some remedies to how to assist with that those unique situations. Furthermore, with that, once the approvers actually approve, the export process begins, and then, like I said, it's very difficult to retract that. So once again, once it's initiated, the export process sends all that information to JDE, and once it's sent to JDE, at that point, it's like a no-go. Any changes, any missed time, anything that you need to do has to be done via that manual timesheet. So I can't stress that enough. Make sure that we verify that payroll before we click submit and approve. So from the Blueforce user expectations, kind of that daily task I was referring to that is requested. I'm going to say it's stressed, and I say requested. You don't have to do this, but I will tell you right now that is part of the process, and you really, really should plan on doing a daily review if you're not doing it now. And the main reason behind that is because the daily review of time cards actually leads into the second dot, the little second bullet point here, which basically talks about punch approvals and corrections being made by 2 p.m. Central Time, because we send out a labor recap every day to every submitter in the company for all their jobs that they have access to seeing or submitting for, and that's sent out at 3 p.m. Central daily. So anytime that report is sent out, it will reflect how many open punches there were in that period. So if you miss an open punch on Monday, it's going to stick with you on that report all day, all week, because it's going to note to you that there was one day that the daily review didn't occur, or that correction wasn't corrected. So with that, you have the punch approvals and corrections that need to be made by 2 p.m. The recap is sent out at 3 p.m. Central daily. And then the clock sites can do the punch approvals and corrections on the Walter device. So many of you may not be aware of this, but editors, submitters, approvers, everyone has access to doing those changes on the actual clocks. We stress that editors and submitters can use the Blueforce system to make those changes. The reviewers out there, which is a role that I really haven't talked about today, the reviewers can do options at the clock. They have clock functions they can do. So that would help a lot of us, a lot of the management team out there, a lot of the district managers and whatnot, to be a little bit more flexible with their day and turning some of the stuff over to those clock site reviewers to look at those punch edits and do those approvals and corrections on that Walter device. So that is always an option to be done. And then on non-clock sites, obviously everything has to be done in Blueforce. You don't have a clock and you only use mobile, use phone in or web punch. You have to do those corrections in Blueforce. So get to a computer and make those changes. So one of the questions I just got here is why don't we get a recap for the entire week on Saturdays and Sundays as we used to? I'll take that as a note. I don't know the reason why you're not getting them on the weekends. You would probably not get one on Saturday typically because it's a new period starting. But I'll make a note and kind of get back to you on that particular answer on that particular one for Sunday. All right. So kind of one thing I always kind of mention in this session is that if daily reviews are actually occurring, and we can actually put some metrics to this because we found that if you're doing the daily reviews, there really is really minimal issues come time payroll is actually ready to be processed. So if you're doing the daily reviews, there should be no reason why there's a manual timesheet need to be created. Just keep that in mind. If we're keeping up on that and staying on task with that, we should really not have any issues for manual timesheet. So the question now becomes is, what do I do or how do I handle those payroll adjustments? So as I mentioned, payroll adjustments are going to be handled on a manual timesheet, and this is done in Blueforce. And I'll show you here a little bit. There is a regular timesheet that you're used to on a daily and weekly basis. But they also have a separate timesheet called a manual timesheet, which you'll go in there and do your adjustments for. Now, all adjustments will be handled in Blueforce using the manual timesheet process. This basically includes those interim check situations for unpaid hours. These are handled separately from your regular timesheet. And obviously, the ability to enter up to 2 pay periods prior. So manual timesheets will allow you to go in there and enter previous pay periods. So the last 2 pay periods, you can go into the manual timesheet and enter to your heart's content. But if it's greater than that time frame, if we're talking about something back in now at this point, early January, maybe even into December we're missing, obviously those time frames would actually require additional assistance from corporate payroll. However, I will tell you, please do not go straight to corporate payroll to inquire about missed time for last week. If there's a missed time situation from last week, we need to go into the manual timesheet and enter that. So to reiterate, how do you handle the manual time payroll adjustments for the current period? Obviously, if it's in the current period, payroll has not been yet approved. So if it is in the current pay period and it's not been approved, that is the key here, then there's no need to create a manual timesheet for any hours that reflect the dates within that open period. So if your week if it's a 2-week period and you need to enter vacation hours within this 2-week period that is the current open period, there is no need for a manual timesheet. You can go in straight into the current period and enter those hours. All your time, all your rate types are loaded on the regular timesheet for you to be able to do this. Once again, if it's maybe just for last week, I think the question always comes up is, you know what, last week I have a biweekly payroll and last week's time was already submitted. I can't do anything with it, so what do I do? Well, if it's just in a submitted state, at any point the approver can reject that submission and reopen that timesheet for you. So you always have the ability, if it's in the open period, in the current pay period, you can always go back in there and make those additions as needed. So the example I provided here in the current open period is January 2nd through the 8th. The employees have 16 vacation hours due on the 4th and 5th. By all means, go in to that to the open period, go in and enter it. There's no need to do a separate step to record those hours. And as far as a prior period goes, so like if a prior period in which a payroll has already been approved, this means that if any pay period has already been approved, then you must create a manual timesheet for those hours that reflect the dates for that closed period. So that same example, you have a closed period this time from January 2nd to the 8th. The manual timesheet will be needed to be entered, will need to be used to enter those 16 hours of vacation time that need to be, that were missed. Now, keep in mind, a manual timesheet is the only way to pay this employee for those hours that are due to them. And do not, and I repeat, do not contact corporate payroll to ask them to import or key those missed hours or do anything else. You have to do it in Blueforce. We want to make sure all the payroll and our numbers, everything good. It's basically apples to apples. So we want to make sure everything is recorded in Blueforce. So a question I get is, what's the difference in the eyes of payroll if its missed hours are paid as manual timesheet versus retro pay? Well, one of the things you're going to notice is on the regular timesheet, you should not have any options for back pay or retro pay. If you are, I can verify that, but the regular timesheet should be only those rate types that reflect the current period. The manual timesheet will then have any of those pay types that would reflect the retro, back pay, all those different things that you would want to reflect from that standpoint. Now, in saying that, keep in mind that the manual timesheet is, like I mentioned, I keep saying, is for old stuff that you just you missed. It's from a closed period. So from the eyes of payroll, they're going to want you to do a manual timesheet and code it accordingly because it's from a prior period. So the next question becomes, how do I handle the payroll adjustments when it comes to JDE security? Well, one of the things that everyone on this call should be aware of is JDE security is no longer a part of this equation. Everyone on this call has access to JDE, no longer has access to go in and enter a time entry, go up to speed time entry and enter a timeline in JDE. And believe it or not, some of the payroll staff has been limited on that as well. So that's why we asked you to go through the manual timesheet route. So everyone has been adjusted as far as the security goes. You can't do any time entry directly into JDE anymore. So once again, the only way to pay the employee is through the manual timesheet. And once again, don't try to look for a workaround or a backdoor to do this. You have to do it as a manual timesheet. So please don't contact corporate payroll begging and pleading for them to do it for you. Because manual timesheet is the way to go on this particular process. Now, one note I will be as we go through now and show you how to create a manual timesheet. The entire webinar is being recorded, so you do have the ability to come back later and watch this. And for many of you that have been reading the EPAY updates, you are aware that they are being posted to YouTube. So everyone has the ability to view this from the internet, from wherever they are, as well as they are stored on Gateway, so you can actually go through the Gateway and watch them while you're logged into the Gateway site. Okay, so let's get into creating a manual timesheet. Now, creating a manual timesheet here, one of the cool things about this process, as I mentioned earlier, it's separated from the regular timesheet. So you can't go wrong here. I'm sure you could, but for the most part, you really can't go wrong here. They're separated timesheets. Regular timesheets, as I mentioned at the very beginning, regular timesheets for the current pay period are going to be noted here in the section that's circled in red. The little section with the arrow at the very top here. That job timesheet section is what normally pops up when you click on timesheets in Blueforce. So what you're seeing here on this particular view on the screen is the job timesheet view. Now, in the blue rectangle and blue arrow there is your manual timesheet. That's at the opposite end of that menu. Now, for the manual timesheet, one of the key things is it's an easy process to go into. When you click on that link for the manual timesheet, And once again, I'll demo this live and actually go through and create this, but I want to go through this document that we've put together first. Once you click on that manual timesheet, it's going to provide you with an opportunity now to create the manual timesheet, in which you're first going to go and select the job. You're going to go in and tell the system what is the date range of the missed hours to be entered. From there, you're going to go in and check mark to show blank timesheets. And then you're going to go in and click on search. And this is going to bring up a listing of all the blank timesheets that are in the system. Notice I said blank timesheets. The reason manual timesheets requires you to put that is because the system will not go back and pull up a timesheet that you did in the past. And I think that is one of the, I don't say it's confusion, but maybe miscommunications in the field, in that when you come to the screen, if you do not check that blank timesheet, this is going to pop up. You have to physically click that number 4 here, which is Show Blank Timesheets, then click Search to actually be prompted with this next screen, which will show you all the timesheets that are available for that period that you've entered for. So what I did is I actually entered a job in this example called Alma Cafe, in which I wanted to enter a timesheet for January the 2nd through January the 8th. In that period, notice that 2 timesheets actually appeared. The one in red is showing a pay period end of 1/2, and the other one shows the one in blue shows a start date of 1/3 through the 1/9. So my date range in the selection criteria in the very top of the screen here calls the two timesheets to pop up on the screen. So in saying that, manual timesheets will appear for that job date range combination that you selected. So always keep that in mind that you pick the right timesheet. You verify that the correct timesheet is the one you need, and then you simply click on the job link, which is the name of the job, in this case 105-Alamo Cafe, and then that will have to select that job. Once you actually select that job, it's going to open up the manual timesheet window and give you the opportunity now to click on Add New. And Add New is the catch here, because it now allows you to add a new line of time. Now, Add New is basically just like a new line, like new timesheet line, that looks very similar to this, in which you can now enter just a couple key pieces of information to pay this employee. You're going to need to first put a work date, which is the work date that was missed, the hours were missed on. So in my example, I put 12/29/15 as my work date that was missed. I then told the system again what job was selected, the job that was worked, which should be the same job that was selected at the top of the screen. Now, let me make a quick point about this screenshot. I'll make it a point again here in a little bit. You've told the system that you had a date range to work with on a prior window, and you picked a specific pay period, which in this case was the 12/27 through 1/2. When I'm entering the new timesheet line for the manual timesheet here, the work date is being validated. That work date must be in the same range here of the pay period. Otherwise, you're going to have a little nasty gram from the computer that's going to let you know that you are not in that range. Also, the job, it's asking you to pick the job again. What it's doing is validating that the job that you selected in the prior window is also the same job you want to enter that manual timesheet for. So both of these fields are critical in that if you get them wrong, you're going to get some nice little nasty messages from the system letting you know that you've done something wrong here. Step 3 will take you to the employee, in which you hit the drop down and pick the employee that you're entering missed hours for. Now, one thing I'll reiterate here a little bit is when you pick that employee off the list, be sure that that employee is able to work this job. If you hit the drop down on step 3 here and do not find the employee you need, chances are, and I would put money in 99.9% of the time here on this, that the employee is simply, if you go to the employee record, that employee simply doesn't have that job, in this case 105 Alamo Cafe, on his or her working jobs record on their employee profile. Remember, the working jobs dictates what jobs the employees can clock in and out of. So that is a key thing to keep in mind with step 3. If you don't see that employee available, go check their working jobs record on their employee profile. And once again, all editors, submitters, and approvers have access to that working jobs section. That's a topic I talked about in my weekly webinars last week, which many of you looking at the names here did attend. But if you all did not attend, let's make it a habit to attend these other weekly webinars on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They are the same session each day, but attend one of those because there's always some cool little tip or little update on some process that we've done in Blueforce. Step 4 here. Next, you're going to go into the task area where you can go through and now pick the task that the employee worked. Now, the task does affect the coding, so make sure you do put in the right task as far as where it's going to hit on the GL, so the general ledger from a financial standpoint. So make sure the right task is selected. Step 5 could be an optional step, but if you have a work order that this employee's time needs to be coded against or allocated to, be sure you hit the drop down and pick that work order as needed. And then lastly, enter the past pay date, which is pay period in parentheses. As a guide here, I tell everyone, go back in there. I don't like the name of this column whatsoever. Just go in here and put the start date of this pay period. So like it says in this example, I put 12/27 as my start date. Just go in and make sure 12/28 is the start date that you use. 12/27 is the start date that you use for the start date of the pay period you selected. So that's just kind of a way to do that standpoint. All right, continuing on, and I have a question, but that's going to be highlighted on the next screen here. So on the Manual Timesheets, the next option is select the rate type for the employee worked. Now, the rate type is basically regular. There are some other ones available there, obviously, but regular is probably the one you use most of the time because you want to note that it's just regular pay you missed. Step 8 would be then to enter the total number of hours worked. So from a Manual Timesheet standpoint, we're not going in there and creating a time card with a punch in and punch out. A Manual Timesheet is strictly just hours. So for this line, on this particular day, this example is 12/27. On this day, this employee worked as a custodian. He worked at job 105 Alamo Cafe, and he worked 6.5 hours. That's all we care about. Step 9 is the rate. Now, the rate field should be blank as it pulls from the employee profile. Now, many of you may not have access to seeing the rates just because you're an editor or submitter. Approvers can see the rates. As a submitter, as an editor, you may not have the visibility to that rate. However, keep in mind that the system always pulls from the employee profile, whatever that is for that employee. So if there is a change in the rate type, you can always go in here to the rate field and change it. So maybe they'll do $10 an hour always, but for this Manual Timesheet, they'll do $15 for whatever they were doing. You can always go into the rate type and rate field, and key in the $50 rate. However, I would urge you to, if that is not the case, to leave it blank and let the system pull it in for you. Other than that, those are really the 9 steps or the 9 fields that you would need to create a Manual Timesheet. Upon completing those 9 steps, you would then come in and click Save at the very left-hand side of the screen, and I'll show you this a little bit. It's actually on the very left-hand side of the line that you started. So basically, it's almost like a typewriter. You're going to key in all the way to the right, come back to the left of that line, hit Save, and then you'll get a confirmation message that says that the timesheet entry was added successfully. Now, if you don't get this message, something did not occur. So do not leave the screen or do not add any more lines until you actually have this message saying that you've entered made the entry and it was added successfully. Now, one thing before I go any further with this, and it just kind of dawned on me. One of the things also about the rates, just to keep in mind, if the employee had a rate change during that period in which he was due a different rate, keep in mind that those rate changes are driven by JDE. So, if we don't get it right in JDE, we can't just go in here and start overriding stuff left and right in Blueforce. So we want to make sure it's shown first correctly over on the JDE side before we come in here and try to do anything else. So at this point, we've done one line, and I'll demo this here momentarily in the live system. But you can continue to enter additional Manual Timesheet lines as needed. There is no limit time that you can add. Like I put there in that little question mark, please, but of course, we aren't going to be creating any correct. So essentially, we hear so much of this happening where, oh, don't worry about it, we'll catch it on the Manual Timesheet, we'll pay them later. That's really not the approach to this. This is an avenue of making sure an employee is being paid. But as for those that have been with the company many a years, we know that there's been a very high amount of interims, and our goal here is to limit that interim number of interims for corporate payrolls has to be running as one-offs. Now, opportunity for here after you finish your line. Now, we haven't submitted and approved this line. This line is still in open status. You can see that there in the screenshot. You can still have the opportunity now to go in and edit that timesheet. So if you have, you entered this manual timesheet and you put 6.5 hours, then you realize, you know what, I forgot. He also has another additional hour here for something else or for that same job, whatever it may be. You can always go back and edit that same line. You can also delete that line if you realize that, oh, this is not the line I needed. So you have the ability to do that, and this is where you would fix it by clicking edit or delete. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and we're going to go ahead and demo the entry of the missing hours. Kind of use the same example that was shown on the slide. I'll take a similar example. And we'll go through creating a manual timesheet in the system. So give me 1 second. I'm going to switch over here. I'm going to go to Blueforce, and we'll log in. All right, so let me bring this over. All right, here we go. So we've got Blueforce now on the screen, and I will log in here as my webinar login. And when I log in, so everyone is familiar with the screen, this is the same screen that any submitter on this phone call would see. So I bring that up because as we go through the process today, I have submitter rights. So anything I do, submitters and approvers can do as well. Now, I probably will not be going through the whole approval process, just the simple fact that I don't have access to doing it unless I log in as my normal day-to-day login and login credentials. All right, so from the screen, you'll see you have a bunch of different icons. Now, all the icons you're familiar with on a daily basis. So what we're going to start with is timesheets. Timesheets is where you're going to go to do a manual timesheet. Now, so if I go in here, and before I go any further, one of the questions says, does the manual timesheet apply to differential pay that was missed? Unfortunately, the manual timesheet is really just a dummy form. It's going to pull in the pay rate that was out there in the system, but it won't pay any differentials. So that will have to be entered because it's kind of as a one-off. But the system will not go in there and calculate any differentials. It will not go and calculate overtime. It's not going to go in there and calculate any special rounding rolls, lunch rolls, anything like that. It's really just a dummy form where you go in there and actually tell the system what you need to pay the employee. So going into timesheets here, right in the middle of the screen, when I click on it, I automatically take it to the job screen. Since I haven't worked with any jobs yet, the system's asking me, what do you want to work with? Now, as I do on my other calls, I just want to point this out. Notice that a lot of these items at the very top of the list here have plus signs. So I'll just circle a couple of these so you can see. These all have little plus signs. These are just letting you know that that selection that you're about to pick contains a grouping of jobs underneath it. So that plus sign is telling you that's a group of jobs. Let's scroll a little bit further down, and bear with me here because I have about 1,200 records here that I'm dealing with. I've got a lot of groupings in my example here. So right here, these jobs, and some of you on the call may see these are familiar jobs to you. These jobs don't have any plus signs in front of the job names. So these are actually the actual jobs themselves. You know, the job IDs are listed over here on the left-hand side. And the reason I bring this up is because there's always been questions about, well, I see two jobs have the same number. What's going on? Well, sometimes when you see two job numbers, for example, districts, you may have a district job that has a job number that has a plus sign next to it, and you have a district job number that has no plus sign next to it. The ones that have the plus basically contain all the jobs in that district. So if I select that criteria, that checkbox to the left of that job number, it's going to select all the district jobs in that district for you. If I pick the one that doesn't have the plus sign, it's only going to pick the district job itself. So in saying that, you've got some opportunity here to decide what you want to work with. Now, what I always tell everyone is just at the very top of the screen, you do have a select all option. That might be the best route to go through with this. It's just like I want to work with all the records that I see below on here. Now, most of you won't have 1,200 records like I do, but what I'm going to do is actually have a test group that I always use for these calls, and that's what I'm going to select for this particular scenario. So once you pick your job, it's going to take you straight to the job timesheet screen, which is the regular timesheet screen that I was referring to earlier. So this is your current pay period. That is by default is always going to show up here on your screen. If you get lost or click on a wrong link and you want to get back to here, you can always click on the job timesheets link at the top of the menu on the left-hand side of the screen. The one that we're going to work with is actually at the bottom of the screen, and I'm going to circle up there as well. That is the manual timesheet link. Now, when I go in here and actually click on manual timesheet, you're going to notice the screen is going to be a little different. The first thing you're going to see is a blank screen. The top of the screen will show you a search criteria box, but underneath that, that grid itself is going to be blank, and that's perfectly normal. So the first thing I'm going to do here is tell the system what date range I want to work with. So like I mentioned in my steps here, if I go through and tell the system I want to work with a pay period of, let's go back to Saturday the 2nd all the way through the 12th. It's a period I want to work with. And I would obviously show blank timesheets. And if I do a search here, what that's going to do for me, notice one thing I did not do is I did not pick a job here. If I leave it all jobs, what's going to happen here is going to give me a listing of all the different timesheets that are available for all the jobs that I've selected on the left-hand side of the screen over here. So everything over here on the left-hand side of the screen will show up with a timesheet. What I tell everyone on this step is to make it life a little easier. I only have 5 selected. It's not a big deal. But for many of you, you may have, if you select it all, you may have 100 jobs. That means you're going to have 100 timesheets pop up in this grid. So what I will do is go in here and pick the job that you want to work with. So if I want to work with just Alamo Cafe, then I'm actually going to create a manual timesheet. So I'm going to create one for Alamo Cafe because I don't want to mess with these other live shops that are out there. At that point, I can click on search, and that's going to return all the blank timesheets that are available for me for that given range. Now, notice in here that I've been playing around in the system, and I did a couple things wrong here. First thing, one thing I didn't pay attention to was my date range. Notice that I put actually 1-2 through 2-12. So you're going to notice that everything that ends on 2-12 and everything that started on 1-3 falls in this period, or actually 1-2 falls in this period. So you're going to see a lot of items. 1-2 one is right in here. So that kind of will throw you for a little loop. So you want to actually pay attention to what date range you're entering at the top. It'll limit for less confusion. So let me go back up here. Let me go back and say the 12th of, actually let's do the 2nd to the 8th instead. And there you go. That makes it a little bit more workable view. So in this standpoint, there's a couple things to be brought to your attention. First off, notice that you have pay group, and I have 2 different pay groups in there. Let me start there on the pay groups. So the pay group section here, it becomes important because you have employees that are actually hired in the system that actually fall under certain pay groups. For example, if I had a job that was kind of up in the northeast part of the country, and I pick on the northeast there because there's tons and tons of pay groups up there. And I have 2 different groups of employees that both work that same job. One of them is in a union pay group, one of them is in a non-union pay group. In those cases, when I come to the screen, I'm going to see 2 lines, just like I see here, with 2 different pay groups. Keep in mind that if I pick the manual timesheet with the wrong pay group on it, I'm not going to find the employees I need. This is perfectly normal. If you ever see this on your side, don't panic. Don't start calling support and yelling fire. Typically, what happens is just that this is telling you that there are employees that can work from two different pay groups that can work this job. So in this case, I know the one I'm going to use is the one right here called test, because test is the one that's where I have all my test employees in. So that's the one I'm going to use. But just throw it out there. Just keep in mind that it does make a difference. Now, also I want to point your attention to the status. You will see status letting you know what the status of a timesheet is out there. So when you go into a manual timesheet, you can see that if it's an open status, and you can go in there and use it immediately. If it's a submitted status, find out because someone else might be working right now on that particular timesheet. And then other columns here always give you the totals as to kind of a checkoff point for your timesheet. So you can actually go through and kind of verify that, yeah, that's 14 hours I missed, perfect, and it was for 70 hours, perfect, I'm good to go. But that just kind of gives you an overview of what's going on with that timesheet. So for this example, I'm actually going to use the 1.3 through 1.9 scenario timesheet, which is the very first one. So I'm going to click on that timesheet. I just click on the job name, and it takes me automatically to this window in which now I can see really nothing. So on this screen, one of the things that you will notice that you will need to do is quickly click on this Add New. Now, Add New, like I mentioned from the slides, that's going to provide you an avenue to go in and make that new timesheet line. So one of the things you want to do before you're going further, and actually let's go back a step. You go back into Manual Timesheets and you go back into 1.3. One of the things you're going to want to do from this particular step, and I'll address this right now. One of the things you'll notice on the screen is the job field didn't populate in either the pay group. So sometimes the system is just a hair too slow and it's trying to catch up. If you don't want to wait, you can always kind of refresh your screen and kind of get back in here until it actually pops up and catches up to you. But sometimes it wants to be stubborn and not fully fill in the field. Because right now what's going to happen, if I hit a search on this particular screen, sometimes that will kick it into gear as well. So in this case, you'll see here that I actually popped in the job name. I just bring that up because sometimes you'll get to a grid in Blueforce and it's not fully populated for you. Just refresh or click search and it'll actually should kick it back into gear. So now I'm here. I'm actually ready to add a new line. And one of the things, just keep it in mind from the prior window, I told the system in the prior window that I wanted a specific job, and I had a specific date range that I want to use, and it gave me the timesheet to pick from. So from that timesheet, it returns the job and the actual pay period in relation to that manual timesheet you selected. It also returns the pay group. And once again, it's only going to allow you to enter the employees that are associated with that pay group. So I just brought the union, non-union example because we have it all over the country, but that's the one that you would see most of the concern here is picking the wrong one that has the union and you really want the non-union employees. But that does make a difference. And then the only thing you can actually do from here going further is now click on Add New. And Add New, and erase my arrows here in circle, Add New is right here under the job fields. So really what you need to do when you get here, just come back, go straight to Add New. There's really nothing you have to adjust at the top of the screen because everything is ready to go for you. Now, when I come in here and click on Add New, what that's going to do for me is going to give me the ability now to add a new timesheet line. Now, one of the things that you will notice as well here is that it's very fluid. It's wide open. You can do whatever you want on this particular field, barring that you answer a few of these fields correctly. Keep in mind, like I mentioned, the work date, you can use the calendar function or you can key it in higher ways, more you feel comfortable doing this. The calendar function is always going to default to the current date. So like I did earlier, I accidentally put the February dates. Make sure you backdate it to January in this case, in my example here, and actually put the date you want to enter for. So this case would be 1/4 is the day we'll say that my employee is missed and we need to actually have this time for me to go and correct for. So furthermore with that, next is the job. Notice the job will give you all the jobs that are available based on your selection criteria there on the left-hand side. However, keep in mind there's only one job that can really go in here, and that's the job that's at the top of this. So the system is almost kind of testing you here, kind of making sure you're going to pick the right one. I'm not going to kind of confuse it or try to trick the system here. So it's got your number here. You have to make sure you match that up. If I put the wrong one in here and try to proceed, it's going to let me go through there, but when I try to save it, I'm going to get those nasty messages telling me, yeah, I messed up. So Allen Cafe is the job. Employee now, if I hit the drop down, it's going to list me all the employees that match the combination on the screen. It's going to tell me these are the employees that are in this pay group listed at the top of the screen, and these are the same employees that are part of this job record, have this job as their working jobs. So in this case, I'm going to say Mr. Edward here is going to work actually worked this job, and for whatever reason he missed clocking in, clocking out, and we need to pay him now for these hours on the 4th. So I'm going to pick Edward's name, and then I'm going to go in and pick the task that he worked. And we're going to say he was a custodian that day. Okay? Now let me just note, custodian and custodian supervisor may code at different levels from the GL standpoint, because one's a regular employee, one's a kind of a supervision level. So it does make a difference which task you pick from that standpoint. Also on the admin side, if you're picking an admin task and you left them a custodian, for those that know what I'm about to say, custodians would actually be coded at the 50,000 series numbers. The admin will be at that 70,000 series number. So it makes a difference as to where that coding is going to. So make sure the right task is noted. Work order, I can hit the drop down. There are some work orders that are available for this job. If there is a work order that you need to code that's missed time too, you're more than welcome to code it here as well. And then, like I said, the past pay date field, you can hit the drop down here, or you can just key it in. Just put the start of the pay period. So in this case, the start of my pay period is the 3rd of January. So once again, where did I get that from? I remembered it, or I can look up here and see it to the top of the screen. So these two dates should be matching. And then the rate type field. The rate type field just basically tells the system what rate type am I paying this employee. Okay? Am I missing vacation hours? Now, if I go through here, you're going to see a lot of rate types you may never use, so don't fret or panic. These are the rate types I use for all different trainings because I deal with everyone all over the country. So as I go through here, you'll see there's a bunch of different ones. If it's EPAY, you use EPAY. If it's vacation time that you're going back and trying to code for, if he has 8 hours vacation on this day, you can select vacation. I would stress that if it's a PTO type, one of the personal time off rate types, use those rate types because there's a part of the system that will track that for you. So if you're on this week's weekly webinars, I talked about the PTO tracker yesterday's call. So if you didn't hear that, you can join tomorrow's call at 2 p.m. and hear that. That the PTO types are tracked in the system. So you always have a knowing of how much time an employee has used or not used or whatnot. That's always in the system. And then the number of hours. So let's say he worked 8 hours. I own 8 hours here. Now, keep in mind, he works an 8-hour day, but he always takes a 30-minute lunch, so we only really pay him 7.5. The system's not going to figure lunch for you. You're going to have to know that we missed 7.5 hours. So in that case, put 7.5. There was a lunch deducted. Keep that in mind with manual timesheets. Rate, I'm going to leave alone because I want the system to automatically pull in the rate for Mr. Edward here. Now, that's really all I got to do. If I want to put a comment or something as far in, I can. Other than that, just put a save at the very front of the line, and notice how save is kind of, I say it's kind of hidden because it's over here in the blue section, the very far left of the line. And that's just going to be there for you. It's going to stay there until you actually want to save. So when I click on save, it'll go through the process of going through and saving my record. And it's going to pop up this nice little purple little message for you saying that it was added successfully. If you do not see that little purple message, danger, 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 there's something wrong, go back and make sure that everything is correct. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go through and I'm going to say add new again. So Edward here in this case, he had 2 days that were missed for the reason he didn't punch in. So I'll go back here, do the same step again, just hit add new one more time. When I hit add new, I can then go in and it's trying to catch up to me now. So when I click on add new now, it's going to now provide me a new line in which I can then go in and put in the work date again, put in the job, and so forth. Keep in mind you're still in that same period. So typically, all too often what we see here from the corporate side is that we have a pay period, in this case it ends on 1/9, and we have an employee that missed time on the 9th and 10th. So if someone comes back into the manual timesheet and try to put in time for the 9th and 10th of the same manual timesheet, below and behold, you can't because in this case, the time period ended on the 9th. So if the 10th was in another inactive or closed period, then you're going to have to go to that period and actually add a manual timesheet from that, the 10th through the, whatever it may be, the 16th, and go into that pay period and actually enter a manual timesheet for that. So just catch yourself on those days. Make sure you're not actually and stressing over the wrong pay period or pay period availability up there. All right, so let me finish this line. I'm going to go here and let's say that Ed would work on the 5th. So I'm going to go back to the 5th. We're going to go to Animal Cafe. And it might not be Edward in this case. It might be a whole different employee. Maybe in this case, it was this guy named Jay that was missing time. So I can go in here and put Jay on that day. I can actually go in here and say he was a custodian on the 5th as well. There's no work order this time. The past pay date is also going to be the 16th because that's the same scenario. And it was regular pay. Save. And once you hit save, and you get that up, notice it tells me a message up there. It tells me up, please enter hours or other pay. That means that I messed up here. I didn't put in any hours. If you try to go push something through with 0 hours, it's going to fail in our import when we try to export to JDE. So keep that in mind. If you get a little call from someone here at corporate telling you that your timesheet didn't process, it's because you had no rate or no hours. So many times someone will go in there and put some information in there just to push us through and it be incorrect. So make sure you check this before you actually start the next phase of submitting and approving. So in this case, he only had 4 hours missed, and the rate. Notice Edward's rate there is only $5 an hour, which seems to be right. But nevertheless, that's just something that came from the system. So one thing I will point out, like I mentioned earlier, if you go in and notice that the rate is wrong at any point, make sure that it's corrected in JD Edwards. That's where it needs to happen. The system will then update it to Blueforce. Okay, so let me go out of here. And one thing I'll mention also, the purple message here says, please enter hours or other pay. If you enter hours, the system will take hours times rate and actually give you the total number of dollars for that line. The other field at the very far right called other pay, I don't suggest you use that, but if you have just a flat amount, for example, maybe it's a differential, a pay differential difference that you need to pay the employee, the hours were right, but you need to pay the differential difference, you can figure out that out and then just put that amount in other pay. Other pay will be a flat amount. So either use hours times rate or just use the other pay field for a flat amount. So in that case, I'm going to hit save again. Let's see if I get it right this time. And yep, it says added successfully. So I'm good to go. So what we've done so far is we've added 2 lines to this manual timesheet. Real quick, I'm going to back out of here. I'm going to go back to the home screen. Let's say I logged out for the day, came back in. I need to go back. I didn't submit that manual timesheet yet. But I need to ever go back to that manual timesheet. Just go back to timesheets. Go back to manual timesheet. Pick that same date range that you used to enter a while ago, which I'm cheating here because I already remembered what I did before. But the only difference you will have to do this time is you don't necessarily have to pick show blank timesheets. The reason being is because it's no longer a blank timesheet. It already has data in there that you've actually populated. So you'll find the one that just ended is right here for a total of 11.5 hours. $57.50 is what we're paying these employees that are missing time. So it's totally easy to go back into this at any point. So just don't think you can't enter it. I'm done. You still have to do submissions, submitting and approving after this, but it gives you an avenue here to go in and proceed on. So give me 1 second here. Let me go back to, we're going to pause my screen right there, and we're going to go back to my slides just to go through the next step of the process. We're just actually going to go into submitting and approving. So we demoed the missing hours. We're now going to go and figure out what to do next. So the next step here is to make sure that the manual timesheet gets submitted and approved. Be sure to contact your corporate payroll contact via email to notify them that you have a manual timesheet in the queue. One of the things about the manual timesheets is they work in a different queue and they're all kind of by themselves away from the regular day-to-day timesheets. It's important that you email us because if we're not necessarily always looking out here to verify. We do glance ever so often, but if you tell us that you have a manual timesheet waiting, we'll go out there and go up there and look immediately and pull that over for you. Also send via email the special paid check request form still required to your payroll contact so they have that on record as well as to, all these special pays we're creating. So same thing as before. there's two ways of submitting a timesheet. Now, the way I'm going to show you here, I think the approvers might feel more comfortable doing this way. I'll go through in a minute on the screen and show you a little different route of doing it, which is kind of the way that you should do it on a day-to-day basis as well. But manual timesheets, you can go to the payroll summary, and I just want to point this out because the payroll summary under payroll provides you two other avenues for kind of looking at how your payroll is coming along. The payroll summary at the top of the screen is a way that I say all approvers should be checking every pay period. That lets you know how many employees are ready for payroll, how many are not. Same thing with the manual payroll summary. That's going to focus on the manual timesheets only. Okay. Now, in any case, whichever way you choose to go, I'm going to show you a little bit more simplistic way here in a little bit. But if you go this route, you can always pick the date range up there. You can always come down and to that particular drop down and select Submit All. And that actually submits all the manual timesheets and kind of one big group for that particular range of time. Now, as we go through here, the approver will have to do the same steps, come in here. The only difference is the approver is going to have the opportunity to hit the drop down and actually see the options to approve or reject. Now, as I mentioned, and the same thing goes for the regular timesheets, the day-to-day timesheets you do now. When something's submitted, the approver can come in here and approve everything, or they can also reject it. So the reject says, send it back to the approver. The only catch when you reject something, there's a status change that goes to a needs change status, which you have to then basically reopen the timesheet. So that's always the second step to reject. So reject and then reopen if you're going to have to reopen a timesheet for a submitter. Other than that, once the timesheet is ready to go and you've done that part, we're going to come back to this screen here momentarily. But remember, you have to contact your corporate payroll contact. Let them know that you are done with the process. So let me go back to the Blueforce screen here and kind of go back a screen here. Let's go back to timesheets. Just to recap, to go to manual timesheets, on the timesheet menu down here, I pick manual timesheet on the left-hand side on the bottom of that menu. And then from there, I have the opportunity here under timesheet status. I have open as a status. I also have submitted, approved, these changes, and so forth. The first one is always going to default to all. And that says, show me everything that's out there. Now, one thing you can do, it's kind of a little different from the document and it's written. I'll show you both ways. But this way, if I just go up here to the timesheet status and say, show me everything that's open, I have the opportunity from the screen as a submitter to click on Submit Timesheets from this route. All I would do is go in and check, or I'm put an X here, but if I just check mark that checkbox, click on Submit Timesheet, and you can submit this way. A lot easier, kind of what I was explaining just a little while ago. Now, on the reverse side of this, if you want to go kind of a little different route, and the same thing, the approver would come in here after it's submitted. The approver would come here and do the same thing. You can change the status now to submitted to see all the ones that are submitted. In this case, I already had one submitted, but then I could actually go through. Since I'm not an approver, I don't get the option to automatically approve all. I don't have that little button up at the top of the grid. What I can do here, though, is I can actually just kind of view from a submitter role. So that's what I was mentioning earlier. I probably won't be able to approve for you on this call because I don't have that right. That's my example here. But one thing I will also show you is the other route. If you want to go the other route, using the payroll icon on the screen, which is at the top of the screen here, under payroll here, it's the same functionality. It's a different little way of doing it. But I can go to payroll, come over to the left-hand side and click on Manual Payroll Summary. And it didn't refresh my screen, so give me 1 second. There we go. So now I want to go Manual Payroll Summary. I have the opportunity now to do the same thing I did before, put my date range. So my date range is here. And then just do a search. It's going to show me all the timesheets that are out there, manual timesheets that have been created. Notice the date ranges that are over here. And then tells you how many are in the open state, how many are in the submitted state, and so forth. I like this view because it gives you kind of a big picture view as to where you are with the manual timesheet process. So for those approvers on the phone call here, go to the screen and you can kind of maintain and kind of manage where everyone is on those manual timesheets. So one of your DMs is telling you, hey, I've got a manual timesheet created right now. I'll have it done by the end of the day. You come in here figure out if it's even an open state. If you see nothing open, that means nothing's been done. There's nothing in the system. If it's already submitted, then you know it's your turn to take over. So if as a submitter, this is the one I want to actually do, the first line here. So I go over to Action, hit Submit All. It would automatically submit my manual timesheet. Now as an approver, if I was an approver, notice this one, I already submitted the second line, but if I hit the drop down, I don't get an option. So as an approver, I will be able to come in here and actually hit that drop down and see an option that says Approve All. And once I approve all, then I'm done. There's nothing else I need to do with the manual timesheet. The only thing that's left for me to do at this point is now, like I mentioned, contact corporate payroll, notify them via email that the manual timesheet is in the queue, ready to go, and also send that special pay request to them for their records. Now, as a refresher, I kind of went through the manual timesheet process today. As I mentioned a while ago, if the daily reviews are not occurring, there really is no reason why if they are occurring like they're supposed to be going on day-to-day, there's no reason to have the manual timesheet. But also utilize Blueforce's functionality to help with shift differentials. Many of you have shift differentials that that would help you tremendously from having to miss those extra $1 here or there that employees do if we had a system set up correctly. Let's do that. Let's start there first. Holiday exceptions, we can set up the system to go and set up holiday rules. So we can say that if someone punches in on Christmas Day, instead of getting paid regular time, they automatically get paid double time. You know, whatever the rule you need to be set up, we can do that. So reach out to the help desk and let us know how we can assist with you. If you want to have a call to discuss this, or if you just want us to send you the information on how to do that, we'd be happy to do that as well. But stuff like that, let's utilize it to prevent from having to track that manually and actually miss it at payroll time. Now, one thing, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, for those who may have joined a little later, at the bottom right-hand side of your control panel, you should have a little handout section that has this whole process that I covered here on the screen today. I'm ready to document it for you so you can actually download that and hold on to it and refer to this as needed. So kind of wrapping up today, that's kind of what I have. I just want to say thank you for joining us on our manual timesheet webinar. We do have the EPAY tips and changes webinars every Tuesday and Thursday. So please join us for one of those sessions, either Tuesday or Thursday every week, because we share a lot of good information on that. But let us know how else we can help you with webinars, and we'll be happy to include those topics in our future sessions. But for manual timesheets, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you again on a future webinar.